After 42 years as an emergency surgeon, something strange happened. I started noticing the same symptoms in myself that I used to see in older adults coming into my clinic: the heavy legs, the slower circulation, that feeling that your body is not responding the way it used to. And that is when it hit me. I was no longer just treating the problem. I was living it. So I decided to test something. Not in theory, on myself. I adopted the simplest daily habit available to any person on earth: drinking water. And I started experimenting. I added everything you can imagine. More than 60 different powders, compounds, and combinations over and over again. Some did nothing. Some made things worse. Most were completely useless. But a few, just a few, changed something. And here is what shocked me. It was never about drinking more water. It was about how your body reacts to it. And after 60, that reaction becomes weaker unless you trigger it in the right way. When I finally narrowed down the list, only 5 remained. I am Dr. William Lee, vascular biologist, researcher, and author. And today, I'm going to share with you those 5 specific additions to your daily water that clinical research suggests can measurably improve blood flow, support arterial elasticity, and restore some of the circulatory vitality that most people over 60 have silently accepted as simply gone. It has not gone. It has been waiting for the right signal. But before I give you the 5, I need you to understand something about what is actually happening inside the aging vascular system, because this biology is what makes the difference between these additions being interesting tips and being genuinely transformational interventions. When you understand the mechanism, you will understand why plain water, despite being essential, is leaving the most important opportunity on the table every single morning. The human vascular system contains approximately 100,000 miles of blood vessels, arteries, veins, and capillaries that together form a circulatory network that delivers oxygen, nutrients, hormones, and immune cells to every single tissue in the body. At the center of healthy vascular function is a single cellular layer called the endothelium, which lines the inner surface of every blood vessel in your body. The endothelium is not simply a passive tube. It is an active, metabolically dynamic organ in its own right. It produces nitric oxide, the molecule that signals the smooth muscle cells in the arterial wall to relax and dilate, allowing more blood to flow through. It regulates the permeability of the vessel wall. It controls the adhesion of inflammatory cells to the vessel surface, and it orchestrates the balance between clot formation and clot dissolution that keeps blood flowing freely without excessive thrombotic risk. After the age of 60, endothelial function declines in ways that are measurable, progressive, and clinically significant. The production of nitric oxide by endothelial cells decreases as the enzyme that produces it, endothelial nitric oxide synthase, becomes less active, and as the availability of its substrate, the amino acid arginine, decreases. The endothelial cells accumulate oxidative damage from decades of exposure to reactive oxygen species, metabolic byproducts, and environmental toxins. Chronic low-grade inflammation in the vessel wall reduces endothelial responsiveness to vasodilatory signals, and the structural proteins of the arterial wall, collagen and elastin, undergo glycation and cross-linking that makes the arteries stiffer and less able to expand and contract with each heartbeat. The result of all of these converging changes is reduced peripheral blood flow, particularly in the lower extremities. The legs and feet receive less oxygen and fewer nutrients than they need. The venous return of blood from the legs to the heart becomes less efficient. The capillary density in the muscles and skin declines as the microvasculature is remodeled under conditions of reduced flow demand, and the tissues that depend on adequate circulation for their function and their repair begin to show the signs of relative ischemia that my patients, and eventually I myself, were experiencing: heavy legs, cold feet, reduced endurance for walking, slower recovery from physical activity, impaired wound healing, swelling in the ankles by the end of the day. Plain water addresses the hydration component of this problem, and hydration is genuinely important. Dehydration increases blood viscosity, making the blood thicker and harder to pump through the peripheral vessels. But hydration alone does not restore endothelial nitric oxide production. It does not reduce arterial wall inflammation. It does not provide the specific bioactive compounds that the aging endothelium needs to restore its function. It fills the vessel. It does not repair the pipe, and that distinction is everything. Now let me take you through the 5 additions that changed something for me personally and that have robust clinical research supporting their mechanisms. The first addition, and this is the one that produced the most dramatic personal response when I added it to my morning water, is a combination of L-citrulline and L-arginine. And I want to explain the biochemistry precisely because the specific choice of citrulline over arginine alone is one of the most important and most misunderstood details in the nutritional science of blood flow enhancement. Arginine is the direct substrate from which nitric oxide is synthesized in the endothelial cells. The enzyme endothelial nitric oxide synthase converts arginine to nitric oxide and citrulline as a byproduct. So the logical conclusion would be to simply supplement arginine to provide more substrate. And in fact, arginine supplementation was the first approach that researchers tried. But the results were inconsistent because arginine taken orally is substantially degraded by an enzyme called arginase in the intestinal wall and liver before it reaches the systemic circulation. The amount of arginine that actually reaches the endothelium from an oral arginine supplement is a fraction of the dose consumed. Citrulline, on the other hand, is not a substrate for arginase. It passes through the intestinal wall and circulates to the kidneys, where it is converted back to arginine. This kidney-derived arginine then enters the systemic circulation at concentrations significantly higher than orally consumed arginine achieves. A study published in the Journal of Nutrition found that oral citrulline supplementation raised plasma arginine levels more effectively than an equivalent dose of oral arginine, and that this elevated plasma arginine produced measurable increases in endothelial nitric oxide production and measurable improvements in flow-mediated dilation, the standard clinical measure of endothelial function. For peripheral blood flow specifically, a randomized controlled trial published in the American Journal of Hypertension found that citrulline supplementation over 8 weeks produced significant improvements in aortic arterial stiffness, peripheral blood pressure, and endothelium-dependent vasodilation in adults over 60 with mild hypertension. And a separate study examining leg blood flow specifically found that citrulline supplementation increased femoral artery blood flow and reduced peripheral vascular resistance during rest and during exercise in older adults. The dose I use personally and recommend as a starting point is 3 to 5 grams of L-citrulline malate in the morning water. It dissolves completely and is essentially tasteless. The malate form has the advantage of also providing malate, a citric acid cycle intermediate that supports mitochondrial energy production in the muscle cells that benefit from improved blood flow. This combination in the morning water creates a sustained elevation of plasma arginine and nitric oxide precursors that supports endothelial function throughout the day. The second addition is one that most people would never think of adding to water, and that carries a reputation from the wellness world that I want to strip away and replace with the actual clinical science. It is beetroot powder, and specifically the dietary nitrate content of beetroot. And the reason this is different from citrulline, despite both ultimately producing nitric oxide, is that the pathway is completely different and the two pathways are additive, meaning they amplify each other. The dietary nitrate pathway begins in the mouth. Beetroot is extraordinarily rich in inorganic nitrate, and when you consume it, bacteria present on the surface of the tongue and in the oral crypts convert a portion of that nitrate to nitrite through bacterial reduction. This nitrite is swallowed and enters the stomach, where some of it is converted to nitric oxide directly through acid reduction. The remainder is absorbed through the intestinal wall into the bloodstream, where it serves as a circulating reservoir of nitrite that can be converted to nitric oxide throughout the vascular system under conditions of low oxygen, which is precisely the condition that exists in poorly perfused peripheral tissues. The elegance of this pathway is its targeting. The conversion of nitrite to nitric oxide is most efficient in the most hypoxic tissues, meaning the nitric oxide is produced in greatest quantities in exactly the tissues that need it most. The legs that are not receiving adequate blood flow get the most nitric oxide signal to dilate the vessels supplying them. This is a self-regulating physiological system that dietary nitrate supports and amplifies. This pathway is also critically important for older adults specifically because it bypasses the age-related decline of the endothelial nitric oxide synthase enzyme I described earlier. The conventional pathway of nitric oxide production from arginine via enos is impaired in the aging endothelium. The dietary nitrate pathway from beetroot provides an alternative route that does not depend on enos function. In older adults whose eNOS activity has declined substantially, this alternative pathway can restore a significant fraction of the nitric oxide bioavailability that the conventional pathway can no longer supply. The clinical evidence for beetroot and peripheral blood flow is extensive and impressive. A study published in the Journal of Applied Physiology gave older adults either concentrated beetroot juice, providing 400 milligrams of dietary nitrate, or a placebo, and measured leg blood flow during exercise. The beetroot group showed a 38% improvement in leg muscle blood flow and a 13% improvement in maximal leg power output compared to placebo. A 38% improvement in leg blood flow from a dietary intervention in adults in their 60s and 70s is extraordinary. I use beetroot powder rather than juice specifically for the morning water addition because the powder is more concentrated, more convenient to measure, and easier to combine with the other additions without creating a large volume that is difficult to consume. 1 to 2 teaspoons of beetroot powder provides approximately 300 to 400 milligrams of dietary nitrate in a concentrated form. The water will turn a deep red purple, which is completely normal and is actually a visible indicator of the nitrate concentration you are consuming. One critical practical note: do not use antibacterial mouthwash before consuming beetroot or any other high nitrate food. The oral bacteria that convert nitrate to nitrite are essential first responders in the nitrate-nitric oxide pathway. Antibacterial mouthwash eliminates these bacteria and prevents the pathway from initiating. This is one of the most common and most consequential mistakes I see people make when they adopt a nitrate-based approach to blood flow improvement. The third addition is vitamin C, but in a specific form and at a specific dose that is different from the generic vitamin C supplementation that most people think of when they hear the name. And the reason vitamin C belongs in this blood flow protocol has nothing to do with immune function or cold prevention. It has everything to do with a phenomenon called nitric oxide preservation. Nitric oxide is a free radical, meaning it is a highly reactive molecule that interacts rapidly with other reactive species in the bloodstream, most importantly with superoxide, another free radical that is produced in greater quantities in the aging and inflamed vascular wall. When nitric oxide reacts with superoxide, it forms peroxynitrite, a compound that is not only biologically inactive as a vasodilatory signal, but is itself a potent oxidant that damages endothelial cell membranes and promotes vascular inflammation. This reaction, the quenching of nitric oxide by superoxide before it can act on the smooth muscle cells of the arterial wall, is one of the primary reasons why nitric oxide production can be adequate, but functional nitric oxide activity is still reduced in the inflamed, oxidatively stressed arterial environment of aging. Vitamin C is one of the most potent and most rapidly acting quenchers of superoxide in the vascular environment. When vitamin C is present in the vascular wall at adequate concentrations, it competes with nitric oxide for available superoxide, neutralizing the superoxide before it can quench the nitric oxide, and thereby preserving the bioavailable nitric oxide for its intended vasodilatory function. This mechanism, called nitric oxide sparing by vitamin C, has been demonstrated in multiple clinical studies and is the reason why vitamin C supplementation in adults with endothelial dysfunction consistently produces improvements in flow-mediated dilation that are greater than would be expected from its antioxidant properties alone. A study published in Circulation found that intravenous vitamin C infusion in patients with coronary artery disease produced immediate and dramatic improvements in endothelium-dependent vasodilation, confirming that oxidative quenching of nitric oxide was a primary mechanism of their impaired vascular function, and oral supplementation studies in adults over 60 with hypertension have consistently shown improvements in endothelial function and peripheral blood pressure with doses of 500 to 1,000 milligrams per day. The form of vitamin C matters for this specific application. Standard ascorbic acid, particularly in effervescent tablets, produces a rapid spike and rapid clearance in plasma concentration. The form I use and recommend for a morning water protocol is either sodium ascorbate, the buffered, non-acidic form that is gentler on the stomach and has a somewhat slower absorption profile, or liposomal vitamin C, which achieves plasma concentrations significantly higher than standard ascorbic acid at equivalent doses. For most adults over 60, 500 milligrams of sodium ascorbate dissolved in the morning water provides the plasma concentration necessary for the nitric oxide sparing effect I described without causing the gastrointestinal discomfort that higher doses of ascorbic acid can produce in older adults with sensitive digestive systems. The fourth addition is one that I resisted, including for the first few months of my personal experimentation, because it seemed too simple and too inexpensive to be serious. It was magnesium, specifically in the form of magnesium glycinate dissolved in the morning water, and I resisted it because I thought I understood magnesium. I had been recommending magnesium to patients for years. What I had not fully appreciated was how profoundly magnesium deficiency impairs vascular smooth muscle function specifically, and how extraordinarily common that deficiency is in adults over 60. Magnesium is the fourth most abundant mineral in the human body and is a cofactor for more than 300 enzymatic reactions. In the vascular system specifically, magnesium has three mechanisms that are directly relevant to peripheral blood flow. First, It is required for the function of the sodium-potassium ATPase pump in smooth muscle cells, which maintains the electrochemical gradient that allows smooth muscle to relax in response to nitric oxide signaling. Without adequate intracellular magnesium, smooth muscle cells are abnormally contracted and resistant to vasodilatory signals, even when nitric oxide is present. This is one of the reasons why magnesium deficiency produces hypertension and arterial stiffness even in the presence of adequate nitric oxide production. Second, magnesium inhibits calcium-dependent smooth muscle contraction. Calcium is the primary trigger for smooth muscle contraction in the arterial wall. Magnesium competes with calcium for entry into smooth muscle cells through calcium channels and for binding sites on the contractile proteins within the cell. Adequate magnesium acts as a natural calcium channel blocker, reducing the resting tone of arterial smooth muscle and allowing greater vasodilation. This is mechanistically identical to the pharmaceutical class of calcium channel blockers that are among the most widely prescribed blood pressure medications in the world, but achieved through a dietary mineral rather than a drug. Third, magnesium is an anti-inflammatory mineral that reduces the production of inflammatory cytokines in the vascular wall and reduces the expression of adhesion molecules on endothelial cells that attract inflammatory cells into the arterial wall. Chronic vascular inflammation is one of the primary drivers of endothelial dysfunction and arterial stiffening in aging, and magnesium's anti-inflammatory activity directly addresses this mechanism. Despite all of these essential functions, studies consistently find that between 50 and 70% of adults over 65 have magnesium intakes below the recommended daily amount. The causes are multiple. Reduced dietary intake from foods like green leafy vegetables, nuts, and whole grains that are underrepresented in the diets of many older adults. Reduced intestinal absorption efficiency due to declining stomach acid production. Increased renal magnesium losses due to diuretic medications that many older adults take. And chronic stress and alcohol consumption that both increase magnesium excretion. I use magnesium glycinate specifically because the glycinate form has the highest bioavailability of any magnesium supplement. It is the least likely to cause the gastrointestinal side effects, including loose stools, that other forms like magnesium oxide can produce, and the glycinate amino acid carrier itself has mild calming and sleep-supporting effects that are additional benefits for older adults. 200 to 400 milligrams of magnesium glycinate dissolved in or taken alongside the morning water is the dose I use personally and recommend as a starting point. The fifth addition is the one that completes the protocol, and that provides the structural support for all the vascular function improvements that the first four additions are generating. It is hydrolyzed collagen peptides, and specifically the type 2 collagen peptides that have the strongest evidence for vascular wall support in older adults. I know that collagen supplementation is most often discussed in the context of skin and joint health, but the vascular relevance of collagen is equally important and far less appreciated. The structural integrity of every blood vessel in the body depends on collagen. The arterial wall contains collagen as its primary structural protein, providing the tensile strength that allows arteries to withstand the mechanical stress of millions of heartbeats over a lifetime. The venous wall contains collagen that supports the tone of the vein and the competence of the venous valves. And the basement membrane underlying the endothelium is composed predominantly of collagen type IV, which provides the scaffold on which endothelial cells sit and which influences endothelial cell function through mechanotransduction signaling. After 60, collagen synthesis in the vascular wall declines for the same reasons it declines everywhere else in the body. The fibroblasts that produce collagen become less active. The enzymatic machinery of collagen synthesis requires vitamin C as a cofactor, and marginal vitamin C status in older adults limits the rate of collagen synthesis, and the collagen that is present in the arterial wall undergoes progressive cross-linking through glycation and oxidation, becoming stiffer and less able to absorb the mechanical stress of arterial pressure pulsation. Hydrolyzed collagen peptides provide the specific amino acids, predominantly glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline, that are the direct building blocks of new collagen synthesis. When these peptides are absorbed through the intestinal wall, they act as signaling molecules that trigger fibroblasts to upregulate their collagen production activity, essentially sending a signal that collagen is being broken down somewhere and that new synthesis is needed. Multiple randomized controlled trials have demonstrated that 10 grams of hydrolyzed collagen peptides daily produces measurable increases in skin and vascular collagen content over 12 to 24 weeks of consistent use. For vascular function specifically, a study published in the British Journal of Nutrition found that collagen peptide supplementation in middle-aged and older adults produced significant improvements in arterial stiffness measures over 6 months, with the greatest benefits in those with the highest baseline arterial stiffness. And another study specifically examining peripheral vascular function found that the combination of vitamin C and collagen peptides produced greater improvements in endothelial function markers than either compound alone, confirming the synergistic relationship between these two components that I include together in this morning water protocol. 10 grams of hydrolyzed collagen peptides dissolves completely and tasteless in water, making it the most practically convenient addition to a morning drink. The combination of collagen peptides and vitamin C in the same morning water creates exactly the conditions the research identifies as optimal for vascular collagen synthesis. The raw material amino acids from the collagen peptides and the enzymatic cofactor from the vitamin C arriving together in the bloodstream in a window that supports the morning peak of fibroblast activity. Now let me give you the complete morning protocol as a single practical preparation because I believe that a protocol you actually implement consistently produces infinitely more benefit than a theoretically optimal protocol that feels too complicated to maintain. Prepare a 500 to 600 milliliter glass of room temperature filtered water. To this add 3 to 5 grams of L-citrulline malate, 1 to 2 teaspoons of beetroot powder, 500 milligrams of sodium ascorbate or liposomal vitamin C, 200 milligrams of magnesium glycinate, and 10 grams of hydrolyzed collagen peptides. Stir or shake for 30 to 45 seconds. The water will be a deep red purple from the beetroot. Drink this slowly over 5 to 10 minutes as your first consumption of the morning, before coffee and before food. This preparation takes approximately 3 minutes. At current supplement prices, it costs between $2 and $4 per day, depending on the brands you choose. And it delivers simultaneously the nitric oxide substrate support from citrulline, the alternative nitric oxide pathway activation from dietary nitrate, the nitric oxide preservation from vitamin C, the smooth muscle relaxation support from magnesium, and the vascular collagen synthesis support from collagen peptides and vitamin C together. I want to address timing specifically because when you consume this preparation relative to other activities matters more than most people realize. Consuming it before coffee is important because caffeine has vasoconstrictive effects that temporarily counteract some of the vasodilatory benefits of the nitric oxide supporting compounds. Allowing 30 to 45 minutes before your first coffee gives the citrulline and beetroot nitrate time to begin raising nitric oxide precursor levels before the caffeine-induced vasoconstriction competes with that effect. Consuming it before breakfast means the intestinal absorption of these compounds is not competing with the digestive demands of processing a meal, and consuming it in the morning rather than evening takes advantage of the morning window of peak vascular responsiveness before the daytime activity and dietary inputs create a more complex, absorptive, and circulatory environment. I also want to address the timeline of realistic expectations because I believe that unrealistic expectations cause more people to abandon beneficial protocols than any other single factor. The most immediate effects, typically within 1 to 2 weeks of consistent daily use, are improvements in energy and endurance during physical activity, reduced heaviness in the legs after standing or walking, and in some individuals, a slight reduction in resting blood pressure that their home monitor will detect. These early signals are not placebo effects. They are the early functional consequences of improved nitric oxide bioavailability and vascular smooth muscle relaxation, the deeper structural benefits, the improvements in arterial compliance, the restoration of vascular collagen integrity, and the reduction of chronic vascular inflammation develop over weeks to months of consistent use. The clinical studies demonstrating significant improvements in arterial stiffness were conducted over 6 to 12 months of daily supplementation. This is not a protocol that works once or twice. It is a protocol that compounds over time, producing progressively greater benefits the longer it is maintained consistently. For patients in my practice who have implemented this protocol consistently over 3 to 6 months alongside the lifestyle modifications I always recommend, specifically regular moderate intensity exercise, adequate sleep in complete darkness, and an anti-inflammatory dietary pattern, the improvements in peripheral circulation symptoms have been among the most gratifying clinical outcomes I have observed, not because the individual components are miraculous, but because the combination addresses the full biological complexity of the aging vascular system in a way that no single intervention can achieve alone. I want to close with something that has stayed with me since my own personal experience of noticing those familiar symptoms in my own body. There is a temptation, when we understand aging biology, to accept its consequences as inevitable, to frame what the aging vascular system does as simply what happens. And there is something important in accepting the reality of biological aging. It is real, it is universal, I cannot stop it, and neither can you. But accepting that aging is real is not the same as accepting that its consequences are fixed. The vascular system is not a machine with a predetermined failure schedule. It is a living biological system that responds continuously and dynamically to the chemical and nutritional environment it is bathed in every day. The endothelial cells that line your arteries can produce more nitric oxide when they receive the right substrates. The smooth muscle cells of the arterial wall can relax more fully when adequate magnesium is available. The structural collagen of the vascular wall can be renewed when the fibroblasts receive the amino acid signals they need. These are not theoretical possibilities. They are documented biological responses to specific inputs that are available to you every morning in a glass of water that takes 3 minutes to prepare. After 42 years as a surgeon and researcher, what I know with certainty is this: the most powerful interventions in medicine are often the least dramatic. Not the most expensive procedure, not the newest pharmaceutical, but the consistent, daily, evidence-informed choices that give the body what it was designed to use in the first place. I am Dr. William Lee. If this video gave you something valuable today, please share it with a senior in your life who is dealing with poor circulation, heavy legs, or reduced vascular vitality. Subscribe to this channel for more evidence-based senior health information, and leave me a comment below. Tell me which of these 5 additions you are going to try first, and tell me what symptom you most hope to see improve. Your circulation is not finished, it is waiting for the right signal. Give it that signal tomorrow morning,